My bank card was declined. I stood at the ATM on the corner of 5th and Monroe, the same ATM I'd used every Friday for 4 years, and watched the screen flash those words like a slap across my face. Insufficient funds. I checked the balance. Zero. Not low. Not overdrawn. Zero, as if my account had never existed at all. I called my brother. Hey, Mia. His voice was smooth. Too smooth. The kind of smooth that comes from rehearsing. Marcus, my account is empty. Do you know anything about that? A pause. Then, gently, the way you speak to someone standing on a ledge. We need to talk. Come to Dad's office. It's better this way, I promise. Behind him, I heard my sister-in-law Nicole murmur something. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone warm, satisfied, like someone watching a plan click into place that I understood perfectly. I hung up and stood on that sidewalk for a long moment, the autumn wind pulling at my coat. My name is Mia Calloway. I'm 32 years old, a licensed CPA, and apparently the last person in my own family to understand what was being done to me. My father built Calloway and Associates from nothing. 30 years of commercial accounting, a firm worth just over $2 million, with my name legally embedded in the partnership agreement since I turned 25. I had worked there since college. I had built the client roster. I had stayed through the hard years when Marcus wanted out and Nicole convinced him the firm was a sinking ship. And now, standing in the cold with an empty bank account and my brother's rehearsed voice still in my ear, something inside me shifted. Not broke. Shifted. Like a gear finally catching. I didn't go to my father's office. I went to mine. It started 8 months ago, though I didn't see it clearly then. My brother came back. After 3 years of distance, 3 years of Nicole steering him toward her family's real estate ventures, Marcus suddenly reappeared at Calloway and Associates with a smile and a new suit and a story about wanting to reconnect with his roots. My father was overjoyed. He had always wanted both of his children in the firm. He was 68, starting to slow down, and Marcus's return felt like answered prayer. I was cautious. Nicole had never liked me. She had always treated the firm like an obstacle between Marcus and his potential, and she had always treated me like a secretary who had somehow accidentally been given a title. But I told myself people change. I told myself family is worth the risk. That was my first mistake. The small things came first. Marcus started sitting in on client meetings I normally ran alone. Nicole began stopping by the office, bringing lunches, laughing with my father about the old days. She asked to see the partnership documents just to understand the structure, she said, just to support Marcus's transition back in. I thought it was harmless. My father handed her a copy without asking me. Then came the suggestions. At dinner one Sunday, Marcus mentioned casually that my role might be more efficient if I transitioned to an advisory position. Less client-facing, more behind the scenes. I would still be a partner, he said. Just a quieter one. Nicole smiled at her wine glass. My father nodded slowly, the way he does when an idea is being planted, and he doesn't realize it yet. I changed the subject. But I started paying attention. The mail thing happened in March. 2 official documents from the state licensing board renewal confirmations that should have come to me arrived addressed to the firm's general mailbox instead of my direct line. Nicole had offered to update the firm's mailing preferences the month before. I had thought nothing of it. I started thinking about it. The real crack appeared on a Tuesday afternoon when I came back early from a client lunch and heard them in my father's office. The door was cracked. I wasn't trying to listen. But Nicole's voice carries when she thinks no one is around. Once the amendment goes through, it's cleaner for everyone, she said. She won't contest it if she thinks it's administrative. My brother's voice, lower. She's going to notice eventually. Nicole, without missing a beat. By the time she notices, it'll already be done. I stood in the hallway with my hand on the wall and felt the floor tilt beneath me. Amendment. Administrative. Done. I walked back out the way I came and sat in my car for 20 minutes. Then I called my attorney. I want to be precise about the next 6 weeks because people will ask how I knew. They will say I must have overreacted or misunderstood or been paranoid. So let me be precise. I hired a forensic accountant independently. I quietly contacted the state licensing board to place a flag on any amendment filings tied to the firm. I moved every personal financial record out of the office and made digital copies stored on a private server my brother and Nicole had no access to. I reviewed every document Nicole had ever touched in that office. And I found it buried in a routine filing, worded as a structural reorganization, a partnership amendment that would reclassify my position from active partner to silent partner, stripping me of decision-making authority and, not coincidentally, routing my quarterly distributions through a joint account that Marcus and Nicole controlled. My signature was on it. I had never signed anything of the sort. I kept going to work every day. I kept smiling. I kept bringing coffee to client meetings and asking Nicole how her mother was doing and telling my father his new haircut looked sharp. I gave them nothing. I became a surface, flat and reflective, showing them only what they expected to see. Meanwhile, I built the case piece by piece, brick by brick, the way I had watched my father build this firm slowly, without rush, without ego, one solid thing at a time. The morning everything collapsed for them. The sky was gray and the office smelled like fresh coffee and my brother was in a good mood. He had reason to be. Today was the day the amendment was set to be formally registered. The filing window was open. The paperwork was ready. Nicole had dressed up for it, which I noticed but said nothing about. She wore a blazer I had never seen before. She kept glancing at her phone. My father arrived at 9, slower than usual, leaning on his cane just slightly more than last month. He settled into his chair and asked if anyone wanted breakfast. Marcus said yes. Nicole said she'd order from the place on Clement Street. I sat across from my father and watched him, this man who had taught me double-entry bookkeeping at the kitchen table when I was 12, who had driven me to every CPA exam, who had put my name in that partnership agreement with his own hands, and I felt something hollow move through my chest. Then I let it go. "Dad," I said, keeping my voice easy, "do you remember signing a partnership amendment last spring?" He looked up. "A what?" "A restructuring document, reclassifying my role." He shook his head slowly. "Mia, I haven't signed anything like that. I'd remember something like that." Marcus went very still at his desk. My phone buzzed. A message from my attorney. "Filing blocked. Injunction confirmed. State board notified. Ready when you are." I looked at my brother. "Marcus." He turned. "I know about the amendment. I know about the forged signature. I know about the account rerouting. And I know about the licensing board filings Nicole changed without my consent." Nicole's chair scraped back. "That is completely—" "I have the forensic report," I said. "I have the original documents. I have the handwriting analysis. I have the server logs showing who accessed the filing system and when." I placed a single folder on my father's desk. "And my attorney filed this morning." The room went quiet in a way that rooms rarely go quiet. The kind of quiet where you can hear the heating system and someone's coffee cooling and a whole future rearranging itself. Nicole recovered first, the way she always does, fast, pivoting, already constructing the counter-narrative. "This is a misunderstanding. We were restructuring for efficiency. Mia, you've been so overwhelmed lately. We were trying to reduce your burden." "By forging my signature?" I asked. Her mouth closed. Marcus looked at my father, then at me, then at the folder on the desk. He looked like a man who had been very certain about something and was now watching that certainty dissolve in real time. My father opened the folder. He read slowly, the way he reads everything thoroughly, without rushing, giving every word its full weight. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. "Marcus," he said. "Just that. Just the name, but with everything in it." My brother said nothing. The attorney arrived 20 minutes later. Then a representative from the state licensing board. There was no dramatic arrest. This wasn't a criminal proceeding yet, though the fraud referral was already filed. What there was instead was something quieter and, in some ways, worse. The systematic unraveling of everything they had built in secret, document by document, in front of my father, who sat in his chair and aged 10 years in an hour. Nicole tried 3 separate times to reframe the situation. First, as a communication breakdown, then as a difference in strategic vision. Then, when those failed, as concern for me, genuine concern, she said, for my mental health, my workload, my future. She said the word concern so many times it lost all meaning. Marcus didn't say much. He kept looking at me with an expression I couldn't immediately name. It took me a while to identify it. It was the look of someone who genuinely believed they were the reasonable one and has just discovered, conclusively, that they were not. My father asked him once, quietly, why? Marcus started to answer and then stopped. He didn't have an answer that would survive the open air. The next weeks were not clean. Nothing like this is clean. There were lawyers and there were meetings, and there were nights when I sat in my apartment and felt the particular exhaustion of being right about something you desperately wanted to be wrong about. My brother called twice. I didn't answer. Nicole sent a long email that I read once, recognized as a legal positioning document disguised as an apology, and forwarded to my attorney without responding. My father called every day. Sometimes we talked for an hour. Sometimes I didn't have the words, and neither did he, and we just sat on the phone in silence for a while, which felt honest in a way that conversation sometimes couldn't be. He removed Nicole's access to the firm the same week. He asked Marcus to take a leave of absence. He told me, voice careful and heavy, that he didn't know how much he had missed and how much he had allowed himself not to see, and that he was sorry. I believed him. Grief and accountability can exist in the same person, even when that person failed you. I was learning to hold both of those things at once without letting either one cancel the other. The licensing board completed their review 6 weeks later. The forged amendment was nullified. My position was formally reinstated, in writing, with the original terms intact. The forensic accountant's report was submitted to the district attorney's office. I was told to expect a charging decision within 90 days. On the day the reinstatement paperwork was finalized, I walked back into Calloway and Associates alone, before anyone else arrived. The office was quiet and dim and smelled like old wood and the particular kind of paper that accumulates in a place where serious work has been done for a long time. I stood in the doorway of my father's office and looked at the framed photo on his desk. The two of us at my CPA certification ceremony, me in a terrible blazer I was very proud of, him with his arm around my shoulders and a smile that looked like relief and pride mixed together. I thought about the ATM screen. Insufficient funds. I thought about Nicole's voice through the cracked door. By the time she notices, it'll already be done. I thought about all the ways I had been underestimated, and all the ways that underestimation had, in the end, become the only tool I needed. My phone buzzed. My attorney. It's official. Everything is restored. Charging documents filed this morning. I set my bag down at my desk. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the client roster I had spent 4 years building, every name familiar, every account a relationship I had cultivated with patience and care and competence that no forged signature could touch. Then I got to work. People ask me sometimes, friends, my therapist, once a cousin who heard the story secondhand and called to check in whether I'm angry, whether I feel betrayed, whether I lie awake wondering how my brother, the person who taught me to ride a bike and drove me home from my first bad breakup, could have looked at everything our father built and decided the fastest path to it ran straight through me. I tell them the truth, I did feel those things. I felt them fully, in the car outside the office that Tuesday afternoon, in the weeks of silence when I was building the case and couldn't tell anyone. In the moment, I watched my father read that folder and understand what his son had done. I felt all of it. But I had also learned something, in those 8 months, about the difference between reacting and responding. About what it means to know your own value so clearly that when someone attempts to rewrite it, you recognize the forgery immediately because you know exactly what the original looks like. They thought I was the quiet partner, the one who showed up and did the work and trusted the people around her and wouldn't make a scene. They were right about most of that. They were wrong about the last part. The charging documents went through. The trial date was set. I didn't go to court to watch. My attorney told me there was no reason to, and I had a client presentation that morning that I had spent 2 weeks preparing for, and I wasn't going to miss it. I got the call from my attorney during the lunch break. I stood in the hallway outside the conference room, phone pressed to my ear, watching people move through the lobby below through the glass railing. She read me the outcome in the efficient, unsentimental tone of someone who has delivered this kind of news many times, and I listened, and when she finished I said thank you, and I meant it. Then I went back into the conference room and finished my presentation. My father was waiting at the office when I got back. He had brought the coffee from the place on Clement Street, the good place, the one Nicole used to order from, which I had always actually liked and had quietly continued ordering from even after everything, because the coffee was not responsible for what had happened, and I wasn't going to punish myself by giving it up. We sat in his office for a long time. He talked about the early years of the firm, about decisions he had made and decisions he hadn't made, and the particular blindness that comes from wanting something to be true. I listened. I didn't absolve him, but I didn't harden against him either. He was my father, and he was imperfect, and he had sat in that chair and read that folder and said his son's name with everything in it. That mattered. Before I left, he asked me something I hadn't expected. He asked if I wanted my name on the door. The firm had always been Calloway and Associates. Never specified, just Associates. I looked at him for a moment. Then I said yes. 3 weeks later, a new sign went up. Calloway and Calloway. My father's name and mine, side by side, in the kind of clean sans serif font that communicates stability and longevity and the kind of institution that has been here and intends to keep being here. I stood on the sidewalk and looked at it for longer than was probably professional. A woman walking past glanced up at the sign and then at me. "Is that yours?" she asked. "Part of it," I said. She smiled and kept walking. I went inside. There was work to do. There always is. That's the thing no one tells you about the end of a story like this. It doesn't feel like an ending. It feels like a Wednesday morning with a full inbox and a client call at 10 and a cup of coffee getting cold on your desk, and your name on the door, and the quiet, solid satisfaction of knowing that everything they tried to take is still yours. Everything they tried to erase is still here. And Sue and I,